and to give you a little bit more abstract of an idea, for those of you that have stalked my, my Flickr account, may have noticed that one of the most recent things that I've done is actually taken some photos. And the motivation for this was that I have a computer connected to my TV so that I could just watch some DVDs on it and what have you. And I was getting really bored with some of the wallpapers that existed there on it by default. And so I thought that I would try to combine not only both I wanted to combine the idea that it was a computer with the fact that it was on a TV. So I used the character from The Simpsons and actually added him to a variety of photos that existed in not only on default, by default with Mac OS, but also some photos that I have of my own. So this was that one photo that we saw, and you can see that Ralph is standing tall and he's a little bit sooty. And actually using these same concepts, was I able to accomplish this same sort of thing. So again, I'm using this as just an example of how you can use adjustment layers to be able to modify this. And it looks like this was, okay, so I didn't use many adjustment layers here, but I'll still show it to you so you can see what it looks like. You can actually use layering to try to add in additional elements or remove elements from photos and try to make it look as natural as possible, as if it actually belonged to that original image. And using masking, so let's see, Ralph mask. So I found a photo of Ralph somewhere. I think it was on the Ralph Wiggum for President website or something like that. And I just took this photo and just ended up masking it. So you can use the same sort of concept to select particular regions within a photo and then use that to select, to actually form a select box. So typically you would use like this rectangular marquee tool over here and select something that's rectangular. But if you wanted to cut something out that has more shape to it, such as Ralph here, then what you can use is what's called quick mask mode. If you click on this icon that's just below the color selector, this is called the quick mask mode. You see that if I hover, it says edit in quick mask mode. If I click on that, what I can do is use like a brush, for example, and be able to select certain regions of Ralph. And so you can do this actually pretty quickly using brushes and then using progressively smaller brushes to highlight all of him. And then when you exit this quick mask mode, you'll notice that now it has selected particular regions of that image that I've selected. So it's the same masking concept, but now it's applying it in terms of a selection. So then you can copy this out and paste it into something that has just a plain white background, as was the case here. But if you notice, I actually have two layers on this particular mask, and if I remove the background, you'll notice that this sort of grid, this white and gray grid appears behind him. That's Photoshop's representation of a transparent background. So I have Ralph now, and he's pretty much transparent behind him. So all it takes is needing to take him and select all, edit, or no, it's under select, select all, and then edit, copy, and then you can just literally paste him somewhere else. And then, well, you'd have to resize him. He's a little big. But once you resize him, you can see that he's already transparent. So there's not a lot of work to be done here. I think one place where I actually did apply a mask, oops, was in this other one. So in this one, Ralph is looking over sort of the El Paso skyline that existed. Okay, so here he is. And once you paste him in, all right, you can see that I have a few layers here as well. Oh, good. This is excellent, because now we have a couple of adjustment layers. You can see that we have a hue saturation layer, color balance layer, brightness contrast layer. And the point of this was to bring this sort of cartoonish color that Ralph has and try to adjust it so that it looks more natural against the light that existed in the image. So if we just look at this example that I pasted here, you can see that it looks very cartoonish and the color appears incorrectly. But using adjustment layers with masking, you can apply corrective color and corrective saturation boosts or corrective contrast to that particular image. So if I remove this part, you can just delete a layer by clicking on the trash icon. Yes. Now I can see that here I adjusted the brightness and the contrast. So I thought he was a little too bright and not contrasty enough. So I decreased the brightness, increased the contrast, and so on and so forth for some of these other color balances. So I added a little bit more red because it was a sunset, and so there was this sort of warm light that was being cast across it. But after he was pasted in, all it took, and you can see that here, let's see, oops. You can see that I have in this section, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see that Ralph exists in almost his entirety right here. Using a mask, you can just select which portions of him will actually be displayed. So in order to make him appear as though he were hiding behind the mountain, or that he was standing behind the mountain, you just apply a layer mask. So once you paste him in, you apply a layer mask to him. And so I should show this to you because I've only showed you adjustment layers. So under the layer section, you can add a layer mask. Whoops. And so right now you can see that I have a couple of other options as well. All right, I'll just paste them in and show you how this is done properly. So I can do a layer mask, and I'll do a reveal all. And what that means is that the layer mask by default is going to show everything on this layer. If I did a hide all, then it will hide Ralph completely from this particular layer. And now you see that to this layer I have added an all white mask. And so I can use a black brush again to just erase him, so to speak, from particular portions of this image. And it's not, and again, it's not actually erasing him, it's actually just removing or using a mask to hide specific portions of him. And then, you can zoom in and do a better job along the mountain tops. But this is the general idea for a particular mask. And then using this same thing, you can basically just copy Ralph as he exists and apply the layer masks or apply the adjustment layers so that the adjustments only apply to him, as you can see in these particular cases. And so using all of this, all of these techniques, you can create an image that is as crazy and as goofy as Ralph with some of these photos. And in fact, if you're interested, I'll just do a short plug for my Flickr page where I have almost all of these, or I think I do have all of them up available, so you can see Ralph here in black and white. Oh, the one I'm really proud of. There's one that's I think is pretty neat. Where is he? Oh, the pier. No, is that the pier? Well, the pier's cool because I put a little drop shadow. See? Okay, so there's a little shadow there. No, sea mist, I think. So you can use layering. You can use layering effects to just add some, and keep in mind that this doesn't take all that long. Well, once you know your way around some of these tools, it doesn't take all that long to be able to do this. But one of the things that I glossed over before when we were creating a new layer, whoops, or rather when I was creating a new layer adjustment mask, was that I sort of glossed over a lot of these details, saying that most of this was just organizational. But one thing that's actually kind of handy sometimes is this mode select or the opacity select that you see here. So if you happen to already have a layer, you can modify the same information at the top of the layers palette. So you can see here it says normal and it says an opacity of 100%. And you'll notice that right here, there is, well, it's hard to see, but Ralph is here on layer 2. So by modifying the opacity, you can actually make something slightly less opaque. So maybe I want Ralph to be now only 50% opaque and make him look a little bit misty. But one of the neat things is being able to use something, so I will remove all this. You can use these other modes that exist for a layer to add some additional effects as well. So whereas before everything was normal, everything that we've seen up until this point had this normal layer effect, let's say that we wanted to add a little bit of fog to Ralph's feet. And we don't actually, it's hard to color match and it's hard to copy paste some of this information. So what you could do instead is you just remove Ralph temporarily, you select the background layer, and you just basically use this, this rectangular marquee tool. You're just going to select a portion of the image, select a portion, copy it, and if you paste it, you'll notice that what happens is that I get a new layer. Now it doesn't look any different, it's the same thing as before, and that's because it has put those pixels on top of the exact same place, so it's just going to appear the same as it did before. But if I remove these other layers from visibility, you can see that this is what I copy and pasted right there. Okay, now if I happen to have Ralph right here, you can see that if I rearrange the layers, that portion that I pasted is now on top of Ralph, so it's hiding him. It's not a mask really, but it's hiding him from that particular portion. And I can change the type of layer. So before it was a normal layer, but instead I just wanted to lighten Ralph. So I wanted to retain its color information and retain its look, but I just want to lighten him. Whoops, no, I did it for the wrong one. All right, so again, this is what I mean when you have to select the correct layer. So now I've selected the layer that I pasted. If you click lighten and change its opacity to about 50%, you can see that now it's given him a sort of wispy look. And by using an eraser tool that's over here, I can erase it and try to make it into something of a fog-like appearance. So you can use a soft brush. So up here, when you define a brush, you generally want a sort of big brush and you want to define the hardness down pretty much to 0, because then that gives you a very soft looking brush like this versus a hard brush, which will be very harsh. And then it allows you to blend a lot of this information. And so as you can see, it was just a 5-minute thing to add Ralph and add this layer effect, though I did before a little bit harsher of a fog so that it was more apparent when modifying it. And you can see that the opacity was a little bit higher. It was a lightened thing, but still an opacity of 85%. And in fact, using these same tools, you can do all sorts of fun little things. And I think the last one that I'll show you, is it this one? All right, maybe I'll show you 2 more, because these are both, I think, pretty neat. Let's say that you want to add out of focus effects as well. So yes, Photoshop has tons of filters that I argue are not very useful most of the time, but sometimes they do become kind of useful. So here, once you pasted in Ralph and you use a mask to hide him behind blades of glass like this, and you really can do this somewhat easily. Oops. So you can see that here I've just used a mask to paint over those blades of glass so that he hides behind it. Then what you can do is use a filter, and a blur filter, more specifically like the Gaussian blur or the lens blur, to add a little bit of a blur to him and make him look like he's just out of the range of the depth of focus. So adding a slight blur, and you can see it's just compounding to the blur here, but it's the same sort of idea. And because when you apply a filter, you're applying it to a particular layer, you're not modifying the mask itself or the image underneath. So when you're applying this blur, when you have separated out all of these components into this sort of separate thing, then you can apply additional blur without modifying anything else. It's still, if you were to apply it everywhere, then of course everything would look blurrier, or everything would look just a little bit, or rather, everything would look blurrier, or you would also get a blurrier line between where Ralph should exist on this particular image. And so as a finale, I think I'll show you this one where he is actually inside of a dewdrop. Oops. And this I thought would be the hardest one to accomplish, but it actually ended up being one of the easiest ones. And it uses the same sort of idea from that fog one, but basically you paste in Ralph and you align him nicely with the dewdrop. And keep in mind that these images are the ones, they're not mine, they're the ones that come by default with for the wallpaper for OS X. I just thought it would be fun to manipulate them. Then you use that same sort of idea before, where you take and you select that particular dewdrop, you copy it. Oops, not copy merged. Select the correct layer first, copy it, paste it, put it at the very top as the top layer. Now if I show Ralph, I can see that he's here. Now if I select, or if I show that layer that I just pasted, you can see that it hides him completely. But I can change the opacity slightly. So now I can see, okay, well, it's probably too much. But now this doesn't still look quite right. It's sort of getting there, but now using the same sort of idea before, where we change the mode of this particular layer to lighten, what that means is that everywhere that this particular layer, and this layer is the dewdrop that I just pasted there, everywhere it is lighter, it will make the layers underneath lighter as well. So just by clicking on lighten, now I can get something that appears, oops, all right, so I can get something that appears to be just like Ralph is inside of that dewdrop, because now this part is much lighter than him, and so it covers him completely, and Photoshop does all of the hard work. There's not a lot of really complicated masking or color correcting going on here. It's literally just 2 additional layers on top of this one photo to get this sort of effect. Okay, so that's it for software tools, and I hope that now with these things you will be able to go home and have even more creativity flowing from your fingertips, so to speak, and into your computer. Next week, I actually won't be here, but John will be leading the assignment slideshow, which is actually a really interesting way of viewing each other's images as we get to talk about them. Unfortunately, it will not be taped, so if you are planning on not being here, you will miss it. So do be here, please. It will be very interesting, I promise. Then the latter half is actually a movie night, which is a very interesting documentary on National Geographic photographers, where if you are serious about photography at all, I know you've thought about it, that you want to get your photos published, and it's a really interesting look sort of behind the scenes of that. And with that, thank you very much, and I will see you in a couple of weeks.